Welcome to the 9642 podcast. This is your host, Mr. Number 9.
And this is The Fool.
Hello, everyone. Before we get into our core topics, which are football, EPL in particular, and occasionally Champions League and international football, we have some hot new gossip. Well, it's no longer gossip anymore, is it? It's hot news coming straight off the press. So I believe we've had rants from, or at least podcasts from last season, where we talked about Newcastle being bought by the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund.
Yeah.
Whose name I cannot remember, headed by Mohammed bin Salman, who was planning to buy Newcastle. It got blocked by the UK government for various reasons, and the Premier League. Totally not because the Big Six clubs told them not to. That wasn't the reason, right?
No.
As far as we know.
And also not because the Qatari broadcaster, who broadcast all through the Middle East, was upset with Saudi Arabia for allowing pirates.
Yeah.
And so then went to so they were like, you can't do this, Premier League. We paid lots of money.
Yeah. No, the BN one is an actual legit complaint. Like, I have no issues with that one. But there was a lot of open complaints from the Big Six going, this will change the factor and you shouldn't allow this sort of money to come in the league. I'm like, I'm sorry. Manchester City, Chelsea.
This kind of money.
Yeah. Even like Manchester United and Liverpool, like all those 6 clubs are owned by billionaires. I'm sorry. What is your argument here again?
I think it goes a long way down before you get to the multi-millionaires term things. Because we don't see it. I think it's kind of where it was the net worth of the owners of all 20 Premier League clubs. And it was crazy that how far down you get to billionaires still.
Yeah.
For the bottom clubs, there's a few 320 million owners, but they're the short change people.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Mike Ashley was one of them, who no longer exists, and that's relevant. So after all that problem, and I think Bean's problem would have probably been solved out, but there was probably, along with the pressure from the other Premier League clubs, that is why the Premier League felt empowered to go ahead with blocking the move, quote unquote empowered. This is the thing, right? The Big Six don't mind, the owners, the fans mind, but the owners of Liverpool don't mind if Man United win, or Sheikh Mansour doesn't mind if Man United or Liverpool win, because that means the system is in play.
Yeah.
They definitely mind seeing a club like Leicester or Newcastle for sure, because at least Leicester, I think they were planning to figure out how to live in that post-Leicester world, whereas Newcastle was like, it's literally coming out of left field, and they don't know how to sort that out. So they're quote-unquote imposters, right? They're the clubs that the Big Three don't want to end up becoming powerful, finding billionaire owners. That's what's bad for them.
Yeah.
Or at least that's the worst outcome for them.
Yeah, well, from them, that would just be diluting against the money pool, right? Now you're adding a big 7 or a big 8, and having to spread that money around even further. That's sponsorship money, fan money, merchandise money, as well as championship money, or prize money. So I just found it a little bit funny that the Premier League did emphasise the reason why they were allowing it, which wasn't it's not the BN thing, but they definitely emphasised we've got assurances that the Saudi government will keep out of the running of the Saudi government's investment fund.
Which is like, I'm sorry, you have assurances that the guy who's the head of the Saudi government is going to keep out of it, even though he runs this business?
Even though he's also the head of this fund, who has 80% share in Newcastle. I'm not sure how this works. Does he have a name tag and switch to the ribbon to say, I'm no longer the crown prince, I'm just the chairman of the investment fund? Where is this line? Okay, you've got assurances, good work, Premier League.
Pretty much.
The only way I can see that working is if for some reason the financial funds investment fund isn't going to take an active managerial role, but is just there for money.
I have some thoughts on that. I think that Amanda Stavely, who is the front lady for this deal, who basically put it all together and has a 10% stake in the club now, is probably going to be, going forward, the face of this operation. Like, without getting too deeply into politics, Mohammed bin Salman is no Sheikh Mansour. Like, you can have your issues with Sheikh Mansour. Mansour is nowhere near as unpopular as Mohammed bin Salman is.
Yeah.
And, like, just, you know, murdering his citizens in your own embassy is a big no-no, just as a rule, if you weren't aware.
Yeah, that's one of my rules for life as well.
Yeah, like, you know, murder is already against the law. Don't get me wrong, but like, we all know, like, you know, countries murder individuals. Like, it happens. Like, people tend to go, yeah, your embassy is like a safe ground. Like, you don't do that, especially not to your own citizens.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I think because Amanda Stavely has shown she's really capable, knows her way around a boardroom and how to sort these things out. Yeah, I think her reward is going to be she gets to run the business and be the front face of this new enterprise, basically the Ed Woodward of Newcastle, and take things forward. That's things like it changes a lot. Like, this is not the same as when Sheikh Mansour bought Manchester City. Manchester City, in many ways, and you talk to a lot of long-time Manchester City fans, like people who have supported Manchester City all through their lives, went there when, you know, back when the club was in League One, like, you know, and had to go through back-to-back relegations to get all their way back up and things like that. Like, there's a reason why their supporters group openly basically criticized Guardiola for complaining that the fans don't show up because, A, we're in the middle of a pandemic, so come on. Like, who are you to tell, you know, working class people that they need to spend money? Which I think completely fair enough, Manchester City fans. Like, good on you even for, like, calling Guardiola on that.
Yeah, they do have other things to concentrate on. So.
Yeah, and secondly, the whole thing is that, you know, their identity is in flux because of the takeover.
Yeah.
It's a thing that they struggle with. For as long as I know, before the Sheikh Mansour takeover, City took pride in not being a big club. They didn't have glory hunter fans. They didn't have people coming in from all over the world just to come in, you know, like they were the anti-Manchester United. They almost defined themselves by what they weren't, which is not Manchester United. They weren't Manchester United, you know?
Yeah.
It's not something they signed up for.
Yeah.
Am I saying they don't enjoy winning shit? Of course they enjoy winning shit.
Yeah.
Nobody's saying that at all.
It's having to balance those things together, right? Like, we win stuff that's really great. Like, we're doing really well. We've got great players. It's, good times each week. But now we're sort of Manchester United. In fact, it's more now almost that United is not City as opposed to us not being United. So it's that crisis of trying to realign themselves and say, well, we're winning stuff, so that's good, but what we prided ourselves on has been sold in the process. So does that balance out? And some of them will be a bit more idealistic about it. So we should have held on to our identity. That's who we were as a club. Yeah. City themselves sort of have the club has to sort of accept that those sort of fans are going to be either be disgruntled or leave and be disgruntled. But obviously they're like, we'll collect more fans, and the club doesn't care as such. They've got to put up with the fact that some of the fans, especially the older hardcore fans at the core of their sport, are going to be vocal about this at points. And say, even though it's been many years now, it's still a thing that takes a while to sort of set in. So they can still be like,
Chelsea fans who have issues with Roman Abramovich as well.
Yeah.
This is not a City only thing. Now, to put the other way around, Newcastle United are not in that boat. Very much so not in that boat. They've always been a club with a lot of supporters. They've always kind of seen themselves as a big club, rightfully or wrongfully. I'm not making a comment on that because, like, I understand why, and it makes sense. If you go to a sports cafe to watch a football game before Sheikh Mansour takeover, that is, a game between Manchester United and Newcastle, you would see plenty of Newcastle jerseys. They will not outnumber the United jerseys, but there were plenty of them. How many times would you see City jerseys before the Sheikh Mansour takeover? You might see one occasionally. You might. Like one or two, like occasionally, but that's about it.
Yeah. City wasn't an internationally supported team.
Yeah.
It was a rare thing to find. Yeah, it's until the takeover, they're under every stone these days. But yeah, I know what you mean. Newcastle, there were multiple fans of that, and laugh at them calling themselves a big club. They were a big, and they still sort of.
In terms of supporter base, they have a 55k stadium. Like Manchester City moved into the city of Manchester Stadium at the Etihad, as we know now, and they needed to get the number of seats reduced because remember the city of Manchester Stadium was built for the Commonwealth Games.
Yeah.
So they kind of had two lotteries. One, if you think about it, they got a free stadium and they got and one of the reasons was, like, the Commonwealth Games really wanted to have a legacy thing and not have a white elephant in the middle of Manchester. They asked Manchester City to move in. So they got some very favorable terms for their lease to move in. They didn't get a free stadium, quote unquote. I'm not, they didn't get. They're not West Ham, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But they got some very favorable terms. And also, let's be honest, like, when the lease ends, they have more than enough money to buy that stadium now. They're not going to move out because Sheikh Mansour has paid a lot of money to develop the area around the Etihad. But, nobody's going to claim that the Etihad has the atmosphere that Main Road used to have. That's already proof about, I think, the club identity. And that's before, the Sheikh Mansour takeover happened.
Yeah.
Chelsea, when Roman Abramovich took over, Chelsea saw Roman Abramovich rightfully as a savior figure because Chelsea were going close to going bankrupt.
Yeah.
People like Ken Bates was basically like, I'm going to stay as long as I can, but I don't know how long I can.
Yeah. It's like, it would have maybe a year or two more if he could hold out. But he needed to sell. So,
And they were selling players like to fund and stay. They were based. I wouldn't say they were as bad as Newcastle under Mike Ashley were, but they were not in a good position.
No.
Chelsea fans saw Roman Abramovich as a savior. For different reasons, Newcastle fans will also see Mohammed bin Salman, or at least Saudi Arabia Sovereign Wealth Fund as saving them from Mike Ashley.
Well,
like in our lifetime, the Newcastle United went from a club that competed for the Premier League.
Yeah, had some of the best players in England.
Yeah, and was like, literally when, they broke the world transfer record to buy a player in Alan Shearer.
Exactly.
So they were not a small club at all.
No.
Like, they went to 2 FA Cup finals. They came second in the Premier League twice, and et cetera. So they were one of those clubs. And under Bobby Robson, they were a regular Champions League club.
Yeah.
One of the things we know is that Roman Abramovich really wanted to have a Champions League club, or at least wanted to buy a club that was in the Champions League.
Oh, that was like his number one criteria, pretty much.
Yeah, and so if that season, if Newcastle had not finished 5th, and it was like a last day thing, it was a very close run thing, which poor Bobby Robson got fired for. If they had not finished 5th that season and instead finished 4th, Roman Abramovich might have just bought Newcastle, instead.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if that would have been the case. Chelsea is in London, and
It's sort of his 2 main criteria: Champions League football in London. So it would have been interesting if it turned up the other way, because where would he gone? Champions League but Newcastle, or London but no Champions League? It would have been interesting to see which one of those 2 criteria were more important to Abramovich at that point.
And it's 50-50. It's 50-50. He didn't have to make that choice in the end, but I'm sure he would have weighed it, in that situation, and there's no easy answer.
But in an alternative universe, Roman Abramovich brought me, that is fully a possibility. And you're right. The fans at Newcastle are super happy. And you saw the teams Friday. They had on the news showing the response by the Newcastle fans. They were celebrating. There's a whole heap of them out, all celebrating just the news of the takeover, that it's going to go ahead. They're super happy.
Well, I know who are Newcastle fans who I haven't spoken to in years. are like texting me and like excited, and
Yeah.
that I don't blame them. Good on you. Go
No,
enjoy yourselves.
exactly.
Absolutely. Because it sucks to have a shitty owner. Like my immediate thoughts were like, is Newcastle gonna win a Premier League before United now? And are people like 20 years from now when they say United, are they gonna refer to Newcastle instead of like Manchester United?
Yeah, yeah. The interesting thing.
It changes the whole landscape, and it's like how we were all kind of saying for years we've had podcasts going on about Manchester City have the ability to become a scary good, unstoppable club.
Yeah.
Almost Newcastle on steroids. Newcastle is Manchester City on steroids.
I know.
Almost.
The amount of the amount of money that's now behind them is so ridiculously large that it's bigger belief. I don't know if you even need the almost. They are pretty much Manchester City on steroids. The only bit that you almost is any of the financial fair play rules and all the other things that sort of play into it to limit some of that. But the financial resources they've got behind them now is staggeringly big. Like, ridiculous numbers.
We are going to go into Newcastle, obviously, but just as a general thing, like obviously we're going to look at their schedule because we're going to look at relegation threatened clubs. But Newcastle's obviously their main goal this season is to not get relegated. I think, and after that, sky's the limit.
Pretty much, yeah. So I think that's the thing from this year is keeping the Premier League.
And heck, worst case scenario, they get relegated to the Championship. Even then, even if they take that's a season, even if they take 2 or 3 seasons to get back up because they need to fix things up and all that other stuff, because obviously they'll be forced to use a way smaller budget if they're in the championship due to financial fair play rules. But even if that were to happen, that's only temporary.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think the important part for Newcastle Club, Newcastle fans, and the owners is to take a long-term view of the club. Like they can't be expecting straight away that they're going to get trophies here and there, Champions League finals, all that. Like they're still going to take time, and it all from a certain point of view, it's almost be good for them to be relegated down. So I don't think the money's running away at that point.
Yeah,
and they won't get.
It's terrible for the fans. Don't get me wrong.
Terrible for the fans. But from the sense of building the club in the right way, and not having to have the money, fall from the sky and get all stars in your eyes and get a bit, head over heels about all the possibilities. It's a bit of a rebuild where you rebuild up and get back up that way. I think they can do it without doing that. And I don't think they will. Obviously, they're going to have a January transfer window to make the changes they need, and clearly they're going to get a coach switch almost immediately. And I think everybody's in agreement it's going to be Conte. Is there another option?
I'd be very surprised if it wasn't Conte.
I don't think there's another option at the moment. Is there?
I don't think there is. Look, Conte is obviously a great coach, no doubt. He would fit very well. I'm sure Newcastle fans would be very happy to have Conte, but let's be honest, Newcastle fans would be very happy just not to have Steve Bruce right now, right? I hate to say it because he's obviously a Manchester United legend, Steve Bruce, that is. But, the Newcastle fans don't like him for obvious reasons. He's seen as a bit of a front man for Mike Ashley, which he is. And to be fair, that's his job. Be backing the owner, right? Not everybody can be a Mourinho type.
No, exactly.
You're obviously going to get a manager change. Conte, as you said, is the first choice, and Conte is happy to do a long-term project. He's done it at Juventus before, and he was all set on doing it at Chelsea as well. By all reports.
Well, that's what I was sort of expecting with him there. So it didn't really turn out that way. But well,
Yeah, well, I think Chelsea now have accepted they are not a club that does long-term projects. That's
no,
not the identity of the club.
it's very clear.
It's nice to have those things, but they're not necessary for Chelsea.
Yeah. So we've got
Yeah,
our long-term project in Abramovich, really. He's our long-term project.
I think obviously Newcastle's going to look to improve their youth setup because now
Yeah,
Newcastle, if they don't get relegated, they've got the whole northeast of England effectively,
yeah,
and the far north of England for their radius. Like Sunderland, they might come back up. I have heard some promising things about their new ownership group.
so, yeah,
Middlesbrough seem to be forever a yo-yo club.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
yeah, so the Newcastle is in a prime position to basically do the opposite of Brentford, where Brentford had to uh, get rid of their academy because it didn't make sense to keep it.
yeah, yeah,
Whereas I think Newcastle, like that would be I think that would be the obvious startup. Like you
yeah,
start by going, yep, we're investing in youth, and this is how this is how it's going to go, and then slowly sell money, buy and sell a few players who are obviously not going to be good enough to get into the Newcastle team for
yeah,
Conte, and then use that as a regular money making thing to get clear of the
yeah,
FFP violations.
yeah,
Like what's going to be interesting to me is whether Newcastle becomes the front club of a global brand, like the way Red Bull and City Group have done,
yeah, yeah. That could be interesting.
because that is everybody who's done like economics at any level understands the whole value of like having vertical integration into your brands, and and chaining all these value chains, etc., etc. So
Yeah, yeah.
like, and by everybody who's done done economics, I don't count myself because I haven't done economics. So if you're sitting there wondering, like, you sound like you don't know what you're talking about, you're absolutely right. It's very astute of you to notice, or rather, maybe not that astute of you to notice.
I was assuming you were going to.
Yeah. But, at the end of the day, like, everybody can see like, Manchester City has obviously got clubs all over the world with
Yeah,
Mumbai, New York, just to say a few, and they're all strategically placed. And look, they're all strategically placed because they are all obviously sports washing enterprises. But given that there is a global rivalry geopolitically involved, that I could see that happening. And I think, to be fair, unlike Manchester City fans, Newcastle fans are quite comfortable being that club.
yeah, no, definitely. And I think you're right that the youth development will probably be the way forward for them. And not to talk ourselves up too much, but they've got a great model here with Chelsea, like something
Chelsea
to
and
follow.
City, for
And
that
City.
matter.
But
And
yeah,
obviously Red Bull,
yeah, yeah,
who are like probably the textbook
actually,
ability,
yeah,
because
yeah, yeah. So as you say, they'll have a nice big catchment area to connect people in from just natively. Plus, if they've got a good setup, then they're going to be um, getting people in from far and wide, because that's when you're a youth player, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for good setup, good training facilities, and a good club that's going to give you opportunities, so that you can springboard your career. So if they get a good setup, they'll be flying high. As you say, from a marketing point of view, like the sky's the limit. And you got that sort of market money behind you, and the ability to really leverage it globally, and as you say, already got a reasonably strong global supporter base.
yeah,
Like, sure, it's probably dwindled over the last sort of 10, 15 years, but it was
yeah,
always there, and it still is there.
yeah,
That it's still something that can be picked up, and with that sort of money and pushing, a long, long way. And it'll definitely fire back up because the other side of that is they're going to get the talent in. They're going to have good footballers. Sure, there's a good argument going online about, well, who are they going to get? Because they have to sort of...
Who's their Robinho signing? Like the way Sheikh Mansour and the City Group got Robinho back in the day.
Yeah.
Who is their Robinho signing?
Exactly, because it is a little harder because there's so many big clubs now with big money behind them that a lot of the good players sort of have been spread with good contracts where they are and good sponsorship deals and all the rest. So to tear a good player, a current marquee player away, it's going to take a bit of doing. I mean, maybe they've been a bit earlier in the year when they wanted to. There's a certain, Messi that they could have been throwing a ton of money at for that. But that's
I'd love
sort of
to see Lionel Messi in Spanish going on about how he really, really loves Newcastle all his life and is really excited to be at the club of his dreams. And
it would have been the best try. But, I mean, I don't know next summer, if PSG can hold on to all their players, there's still problems at Barcelona and Madrid, Italian clubs.
Barcelona, I think there's a lot of good and even good young players for them to take that, like Ansu Fati, there's Ousmane Dembele, there's Pedri. Like these are players Barca don't want to sell. Don't get me wrong, but I think also, do we think Barca have a choice?
Well, that's the point. Like you got clubs there that their financial positions and such that they probably don't have a choice.
Yeah.
They still haven't shed enough players to really get themselves back under equal footing. Hell, actually, when I'm thinking about it, there's also the obvious choice of Haaland. I mean,
yes,
he's actually coming up for the end of the contract, so they can throw money
even
at him.
British, you'd be like, yeah, even though if my dad played for Leeds and I was a young Leeds boy,
perfect.
I was totally always a Geordie fan my whole life.
Yeah.
And it's great that I get to...
You can see the press conference now.
That's beautiful. Like, it's a beautiful thing. Don't get me wrong.
So, it will be interesting to see who they start stepping up.
Yeah.
Because that is the best argument I've seen of why it's not necessarily going to work out, is that where are these marquee players coming from? They can buy a couple of them, but the top six, even the top six is not a good thing. The top 3 or 4 in the Premier League have got all the good players. So, you have to beat the squads of City, of Liverpool, of Chelsea, of United. It's a hard thing to do, to build that bigger squad up. So
everybody, and I mean everybody, talks about, we're going to build up a great scouting system like Leicester City. By the way, guys, how many clubs do we know that have built as good a scouting system as Leicester City? I can't think of any.
Well, there's Leicester City, and Leicester City.
Pretty much.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not that easy to do, as basically our point here.
Yeah. Well, the same principle applies, right? There's still 6, 7, 8 clubs with billions upon billions of dollars to throw it to people, and only a limited number of people to throw it at. So they're all in good contracts with good money.
There's definitely a diminishing point of returns at some point. Like, 10 billion makes you way richer than somebody who's willing to do 2 billion. But, 200 billion, you're kind of like, you're not really spending that much more than the 10 billion guy at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Because of financial fair play and how that all works.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but, but let's be honest here. Newcastle they have a Premiership and possibly a Champions League in their future, at least. I think I would be very surprised if Newcastle did not win the league by 2035. I'm being very conservative, I think, but
super conservative. I could imagine that I'd say 2030. I'd be surprised or not. I'd give the outside possibility that they missed out by a point or two, and maybe it was something just off during that, some next 8, 9 seasons. But I would think 2030 they should definitely have won something. Of substance.
Yeah, if they get a manager like Conte, I'd be very surprised if Conte would be willing to stay if they didn't win.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
Conte would be happy with cup wins and Champions League finishes because I think he'd be enough of a realist to go, I can't win, we can't win every season. Just look at
Yeah.
what we're up against, So but if he would be happy with Champions League most seasons, once again, there's still going to be 7, 8
Yeah.
teams that are
When are they next look at this season? Let's just assume they're not going to qualify for the Champions League. I
no.
don't think that's unfair. But when are they going to qualify for the Champions League again?
I would say probably in the next 3 or 4 seasons.
So City pretty much did it as soon as they got their first season, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously Chelsea was already in the Champions League when they.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you think next season? Because it's a tough.
No, I think 2 or maybe 3 seasons. No, next season, season after.
Okay.
Potentially the one after that. Like they might be. I think this season they'll survive somewhere. Who knows where they end up? Next season, probably UEFA spots. Season after that, 4th or 5th would be mine. But in the season after that, if they're not 4th, they'd be Champions League.
Because this is England gets about total of 6 competitors in Europe. This is including the European Conference League, which they've just introduced.
No, it's 7, isn't it?
Sorry, 7 places, and at most they can. I think even if every club, like they did the triple, like England were to do the triple and get like all 3 of the leagues, I think at most they can have 8 clubs.
Yeah.
Like that's my gut feeling about it. So this is the thing: 8 doesn't go into 7, right? No matter how you look at it.
Yeah.
One of these clubs are missing out at the so it's 7 out of 7 at the moment. One of these clubs are missing out.
It's 7 out of 7. I think that's not including Leicester, right?
Yeah. No, that's including. That's basically at the moment. Big Six plus. Including Big Six plus Leicester gets to 7 out of 7 places. I'm not currently including Everton because they weren't invited to the Super League and they haven't recently won. And they have and competed, played in the Champions League. Whereas I think Leicester have consistently qualified for a European spot.
Yeah, this definitely counts.
Yeah.
Everton, I think, have been, can't think of much, but they're fairly consistent.
If Everton and West Ham are in there as well, then you've got a Big Ten looking to go into 7 spots.
That's a good point. West Ham counts if Everton counts. Everton and West Ham. Well, Everton at least, I think. They're still in the Billionaires Club for owners.
Yeah, and West Ham are a London club with a big stadium.
Yeah, so they're pretty close to it as well.
Yeah. And if we're looking at billionaire owners, I think Southampton have billionaire owners, Wolves have billionaire owners, and
that's a good point. But they don't.
And Watford have billionaire.
None of them make Europe on a regular basis. At least Everton and West Ham make Europe on a regular basis.
Quote unquote.
Yeah.
But that being said, I think with the new version of the Champions League, there's a bit of an expansion. Is that right? I don't know if that expands the total number of teams competing.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it did expand the total of the teams competing. But I don't know if it expanded England's quota. Maybe it expanded by 1.
Might be. But even then, at best case scenario, we're looking at 8 into 8 versus 10 into 8, which is potentially what can happen.
Yeah.
That's the other side of it. So competing, I think at the moment, just getting into the Europa League is probably like a club like Leicester. I think their goal is to always qualify for Europe, and I think they're targeting winning the Europa League at least.
Yes.
Like that's a very important competition for them because if they fall outside the top 4, which is kind of likely, that gives them a Champions League spot. But also, I think they don't have a big English club to compete with in the Europa League. They don't have any of the big clubs from the other countries to compete with.
Yeah.
And to be honest, if they're not good enough to beat clubs like or like Man United weren't good enough to beat Villarreal, if they're not good enough to beat clubs like, Atletico Bilbao or Real Betis and the like, then, they don't deserve to be in the Champions League. I'm sorry.
Exactly.
So yeah, the Newcastle thing is definitely gonna change everything.
Mm.
The other, the whole thing, like, it's put every club on notice because I think, for example, like from a Manchester United point of view, they were probably a bit casual about how quickly they want to get the Pogba deal sorted out, because they had I can't remember, I believe the player from a player from AC Milan who plays in their midfield, whose name escapes me just at the moment, who they're like, yep, he's the Pogba ready-made replacement right there. And the thing is that that guy could go and play for Newcastle now, and if he's happy to go out of Italy, which not a lot of Italian players are,
Frank Kessie.
Frank Kessie, that's who I'm thinking of. Yeah, I think Frank Kessie was the guy United were basically going, yep, this is our ready-made, like-for-like replacement for the Paul Pogba.
Yeah.
Without give or take. But the whole thing is like, now they're like, yeah, we have to get this deal done. Kessie's not going to want to play at Newcastle if there's no Champions League next year, which I think is fair, potentially, because he's a good player. But the moment but if, Newcastle come up to him and put him on an offer he can't refuse, he might not refuse it.
Yeah, exactly. It might be a contract which, sure, it's not Champions League next year, but there'll be Champions League in X number of years. Like in 3 years.
Like, they might even be like, oh yeah, and if we get to the Champions League, by the way, we're paying you this much extra because that's worth it.
Or if we don't make it, then you're free to find a new club and we'll pay you this much. As a, sorry, we screwed up for it.
Yeah.
Like, so that he has a out if the promises don't come true. He's
going
there on a you'll get Champions League in a few years' time. But if you don't, then here's what happens if you don't. So we've got a clear out for you, and here's what happens if you do. It's the money.
You have to remember that the first qualification for the Champions League is what allowed City to get players like David Silva and Aguero.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's what got us our money. So I understand.
Yeah.
It's just I do look at the moment and think, even with 320 billion behind you, and say it's going to be hard getting the Champions, as we just pointed out, with the pure number of clubs sitting around.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard to get Champions
The math is hard.
Yeah. Without those players first.
Yeah.
It's hard, and those players won't come without it. So it's sort of...
And I think also with due respect to Newcastle, Manchester City were not a club like going into relegation. They were a club that was kind of mid-table, and Chelsea had just qualified for the Champions League, so they already had a good squad. Frank Lampard was already there. John Terry was already there.
Yeah. Di Matteo was still playing. He still had what's his name? Whose name's just gone straight in my head, even though it should stay in my head. But that guy.
Yeah, that guy.
The striker.
Zola was still there. Like, Zola specifically had to agree not to just play in the, decided, he basically went, I've got Chelsea to the Champions League and I'm going back to...
not Zola, the other one. No, Zola, Zola left. Not before, the one before Drogba.
You had Tor Andre Flo, you had Idega Johnson still.
Yeah, we had those two. The other ones. The actual ones.
Idega Johnson was good.
They were, both of them were good.
Hasselbank.
See, I was like, I know the guy. He looks like this. This is him. He does the cool stuff. But Hasselbank was
Lloyd Hasselbank. You call yourself a
I know. Man. I was bracing myself already, and I couldn't remember it. But yes, Hasselbank. This had Hasselbank.
Even players like Dennis Wise and Graham Lasso were there, like very good, able players who'd given years had been very good players for Chelsea.
Yeah. That was still there at least to give, backroom talk to ones, to fill in, come off the bench. They were no longer, I think, starting either of them.
And
So
Chelsea were a
different
club that were making cup finals. They had
now. Yeah,
qualified for Europe before, so they had players who knew how to win at Chelsea as
yeah.
well.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with Chelsea just before that was always the consistency.
Yeah.
We'd be able to beat the other quote-unquote big clubs. If there was a club that was in the table, we'd probably beat. If they were below us in the table, we'd probably lose. That was just how it worked. It was
Yeah.
immensely annoying. So yeah, I think the big thing we got out of it all was consistency. We started actually getting consistent results. And that,
I still remember the year that United got the treble. I believe Chelsea only lost 3 games.
yeah.
Which, yeah, sure, it doesn't sound that impressive in this era of incredible Manchester United and Liverpool teams, but back then people were very impressed.
Yes, exactly.
And rightfully so, I will add.
Yeah, oh, exactly. It was a crazy year all around. Sure.
Yeah, and so that was the Chelsea, and Chelsea were quite a bit richer and more and willing to spend money than any other club in the Premier League. Like people openly admitted that this was Roman Abramovich had bought Chelsea as a hobby.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the best kind of owner. Like, I hate to say it for you, if you want to be a guy who follows a club that wins things, that is the best type of owner. The guy who's basically playing championship manager.
Yeah, exactly. There was a lot of ridicule at the time, but I think definitely over time it's proven to be the best option. Providing support when we needed it, but hasn't. He's brought in people to run the club and hasn't interfered with how the club gets run, that's the bit that you want. With someone who's passionate, and he's shown himself to actually be passionate about the football club as well. I mean, a lot of people thought it was a tax haven, throw some legal.
Probably. That's probably all true, but both things can be true.
Yeah. Should say this. Yeah, also probably actually true. But there was the implication that it was also true that
Possibly it was also all he cared about at the beginning.
Yeah.
But there's evidence to suggest that might be true. But also, he owned CSK Moscow before he bought Chelsea, so he was already interested in football. He's just never experienced English football before, and he fell in love with the atmosphere at
Oh, he definitely did. He caught the fever.
Yeah, he caught the fever, and that happens.
Yeah.
So it became more than just a club, quote unquote, to him.
Yeah, exactly. And that's been shown pretty clearly over the years.
Yeah.
Even if these days he can't really walk for his own toughness, I think these days he doesn't show up to actually watch games live anymore.
Yeah, well, I think he has trouble getting into the UK, doesn't he? There's
not anymore, but he can't. He can go into the UK whenever he likes, as long as he doesn't go for business reasons. He refuses to go to the UK if he can't conduct business whilst there.
Fair enough.
Currently, he actually is there at the moment. He has travelled to the UK at the moment, so I think he may be there for Newcastle's next home game. He's visiting his sister. I think his sister lives there, and he's gone to London. But he managed to secure an Israeli pass, which allowed that a little easier, but he still can't conduct business.
It is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is. It's literally what counts as conduct business. Lots of fun on social media about how he's just taking the tour of Stamford Bridge.
Yeah.
But just perfectly legitimate thing to do. Just happened to be touring the boardroom and the CFO's office. And
yes.
There's a perfectly legitimate places for the tour to be taken.
Absolutely. The Newcastle stuff. There's just so much to do, so much happening there. There's a lot of fun speculation, but it's really that's all there is. We don't really know. Anyways, I think that's all we have time for now. We'll definitely be talking to you guys a bit more about other sports that may or may not be going on in the world.
We've got EPL and Champions League to cover.
Yeah. But I think for now, we'll say goodbye. Thank you for listening.
See you next time.